I think that'll be good. But also, like, I wanted to ask. I wanted to like. I know you Amanda did some stuff on the neurophenomenology stuff too, so um we can do that. But I'll share my screen here for some things. I'm experimenting with Figma. Actually, I really like it for arranging things. Not the first time I really tried to do a PDF on it, but we'll see. But yeah, anyway, so welcome. Whoops, this is actually this is the meeting we want today. Yeah, so we didn't meet last week. I was very fatigued. I'm a little bit better now. I'm a little bit unsure about next week. I think I'm going to try to do it, but I'm going to be traveling, so it will be traveling for essentially for work stuff. So it may not work, but I think it can unless something in the evening comes up. It should be fine, but we'll see. Last time we talked a lot about kind of future directions for the project, different ways to go with that. There's been some, for my sort of like intro, I've been doing some things with the DSM. I don't know what to call it. I guess I call it the DSM project. It's not really a lot yet. I'll show a little bit about that in a little bit. But DSM stuff, I've been thinking about how to structure some papers and deliverables, how to what to kind of pursue in terms of in terms of our deadlines and whatnot. Just to mention this for a second, I think I'm going to submit an abstract, but it's kind of it won't really be anything major, so probably not for Kuksai. But there is A-Life, there is the Embodied Intelligence Conference, which finally sent their emails out, and that's basically, if I put anything up in here. It's kind of a typical open submission from last time. It's you can basically just put in your, it's just a Google Form submission and kind of generic, pretty low key, low profile registration process. So I guess we can all figure out something potentially if we want to do that. I know there's a cybernetics paper, which we'll probably maybe talk more about tomorrow, or when we meet next for that. But yeah, that's kind of, there's a lot of things there that I want to try to do. I didn't get to really get a big update from Hussein about the reality hack, but maybe I wish he would come Saturday to talk more about it there. But yeah, that's kind of my general update. Anyone else want to share any welcome thoughts for today?
I know I wanted to say something about the, he dropped a little text in cybernetics, I think. And anyway, I'll find it.
The one about the psychiatry or the in cybernetics?
I think it was the kind of splintering of cybernetics after the, let's say 50s. And
the Bird Northrop thing?
Was that also, Amanda, was that the one where it was like everything's been done in information theoretics? They canceled the second conference.
Yes, yeah. Information theory was very exciting, but it turned out that Shannon had done everything that it was possible to do. Minsky often told the story about how he was on the program committee for the second international conference on information theory, and they called it off because there were no new results. And it was pretty clear there never would be any new results. Yeah, I thought that was interesting because it was kind of like, that's the stuff that people say about cognitive science. Yeah, that's what I just read from. The first part is what kind of sounds
Oh,
how
no.
people describe cognitive science. Like,
Yeah.
oh, there are these figures, but they kind of aren't doing the same thing.
You know, well, I was talking with a friend, and he was asking, like, for a definition of cognitive science, or certainly like you know. Anyway, I gave him the hexagon, whatever, model.
Oh, it's not doing that thing for just me. For me.
The six pillars, and there was something about anthropology that that sounded like his response was like, "Oh, anthropology, that seems like a field that's run its course or something like that." and I suddenly thought of that information theoretic, like there's no new answers, there's no new results or something like that. But
I haven't read this paper yet, but this is something I wanted to eventually. Just like this.
Oh, I would love to. I'd love to. And Tom, I don't know if this would be considered anthropology, but is it Tom Feroce, the Okinawa guy?
Yeah.
Feroce, yeah. He's got a paper on like some sort of civilization level.
Yeah, it just came out right on LinkedIn.
Yeah, just yeah. But it's like on OSF, yeah. Excuse me. And anyway, it's. But my friend was saying like, oh, it's like, is there, what are anthropologists doing today, or something like that, and it just kind of reminded me of the philosophers in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like wanting the answer but not really knowing what the question was. Like what exactly were you hoping to get from anthropology, and when would you, how would you know you're done?
So that paper, it's interesting. There are no anthropologists on it. They're all psychologists or something else.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, the one Rose paper?
Yeah, I don't see any anthropologists, I would think.
So it's a bunch of psychologists judging anthropology.
I don't know. Well, maybe not judging, but yeah.
Well,
it's kind of like, right.
I'm super interested. I said to Alison Moutry that I was so glad that he was a part of CARTA, and this is like I don't even know what the history is of CARTA. I'd be really curious what brought CARTA together, but it seems like this multidisciplinary effort at San Diego. And like the most recent CARTA meeting had like, it had Alison Moutry, like a linguistics person and an anthropologist. I'm not sure, but it's like anthropogeny is, I think, what they call it, right? Anyway, it just seems like, people judging the fields aren't really, I don't know what they thought. Like we've already checked out all the tribes or something like that. I think with my friends, like that's it, as if that was the goal of. Anyway, I'm glad that the anthropologists are a part of academia.
I feel like we don't have to go here. I kind of don't want to go here, so I'm hesitant to even say this. But if someone asked me like, well, how would you describe cognitive science? I feel like hexagonal cognitive science and computation as the nexus. I feel like that's that was the project for a while, and now I don't know. like I don't like there was an effort, and then like it's actually been really refreshing. I guess this will be my segue into DSM stuff. It's been really refreshing looking at the DSM stuff, just because as and maybe there are things in cognitive science that I don't know, which is very possible. But the DSM has sort of been this like very obvious target for almost a century, and it has sort of a coherent. I'll put this over here. It has sort of a coherent evolution, even if it's flawed, and even just like in the Wikipedia sense of it. So I guess one thing I'll say about to talk about the DSM project right now. What is it really? Let me see if I can pull this up. Right now, I'll get to this in a second. Whoop, don't know what just happened there. Bear with me a second. Sorry, lost everything I wanted to share. I have no idea what. Okay, okay. It didn't make the jump. It went back between my screens. All right, let's try this again. Okay. I mean, when I said the DSM project right now, it just mean this kind of exploration period and working with Jen. Jen did things with the lab last year for NICWIC, and she, I forget exactly what she worked on there, but she's kind of doing some DEI ethics board related stuff. We were going to do a paper, didn't quite go there. So, and this came up because I've been interested in as sort of this foray of like, I know things touching upon psychiatry, I know things touching upon like psychology and vaguely some of the biology stuff, but it's been this process of whatever. And I think the book is aptly named for mind fixers. Yeah, Psychology's Troubled Search for the Biology of Mental Illness. And it's kind of interesting now to kind of throw it back to the biology of cognition, which I'm really curious where things intersect from this. But mostly, Jen, I'm reading a little bit of this book too. We're kind of going to the history. The plan right now is just to, and this is open to other people doing. It's kind of it's forming a bit more concretely, but the plan is basically just to do a small series of blog posts. I really like. I can do presentations, but I really want to encourage Jen to do a few presentations at the meetings just to get used to it more so. But some presentations on things like different parts of the history, and then we're looking at. Can I show this here? I'll just do it here. Oh yeah, here. This will do, I think. Nope, it's not showing up here.
Can I say one thing, Jesse?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think in Mind Fixers, you'll see it's important to see how each revision of the DSM was kind of responding to a different context, and like I think I think one of the difficulties, so I want to make this parallel with cognitive science. It's hard for cognitive science to kind of have the same definition when it kind of goes back to the 50s. You know what I mean? Like when you try and put ourselves, you're like remember Carl Friedman talking about what it was like to be in those kind of like early cybernetics meetings, and certainly psychology was really trying to, or was really responding to kind of Skinner's dominance at the time, like we're so far away from that part. Well, all the reinforcement learning is going to come back into the parlance. And like DSM, like super, like mind fixtures. It seems like each revision, she sets up the kind of, what were the debates of the day, and then you can see how that particular issue kind of dominated that particular revision. Might help. Yeah.
It's one of the things also, just as like kind of a investigator side note or something, like as I go, and I say this kind of semi-ironically, as I'm really excited to go through this paper, which is over 50, 60, 50 years old, 54 years old, whatever.
It's my age.
I'm excited to do this, but also like, there's a certain challenge of not exactly relevancy, but, and I say this as someone who's like Captain Frontier Maps and Captain Trajectory, and like I'm overly that way in some ways, and care maybe more than necessary or should. But there's sort of this weird, one of the things I would love to actually do serious work on one day is almost like an applied philosophy, history of science thing, which is the nature and the kind of the access to certain discussions and what is sort of canon for a developmental story of a field feels so different than like now, in the sense that now has so much other stuff going on that it's not like, oh yeah, the development, you could name a handful of people who are kind of the cybernetics guys who built like Wiener and Shannon and this thing, and then did this way, and then this, and then they all opened up for the biology, and now they're sort of inspired Maturana. And it's like, I continue to think of Margaret Bowden's like that line. She drew this line around like 2007. It's like, someone could basically be on top of everything up until that point. And then after that point for cognitive science, there was no way to follow the developments and the studies and the diversity of things happening. And I feel like between that and previous conversations we've had in this group and in the lab about kind of modern day Norbert Wiener, I feel like there's something about, I think there's some really important, like I would love to make sort of a framework to describe like the points lost in translation, like almost maybe not really every good regulator sense of accounting for the different states, but sort of like there's some very particular challenge about the kind of narrative development and the work that was done, and just it was much more constrained because there were just less people doing it. And so it's kind of that classic thing of, are the ideas great, or just were there fewer of them, so everything's centered around them anyway and reference them all the time anyway? It's versus now where there's a whole lot of stuff going on that not everybody knows about, and unless you're combing through every poster and every idea and every detail, or you happen to have great funding and great publicity, it's that struggle is there. So I guess that's sort of a side note that I would like to come back to in the future. But as far as to kind of wrap up on the DSM stuff, it's been really interesting to kind of go through. I think we, as in the project, as in mostly me and Jen right now, are kind of in a deeper dive of like DSM 1, 2, and 3, and kind of the getting up to the biology stuff. I think we might break things down into like, yes, we're gonna have a theme and ideas for like an overview blog post or something, and maybe historically segment it. I think how we might historically segment it. And this is a very, very, very incomplete. It's not a post. It's more like just putting a bunch of ideas down. But like pre-DSM stuff. This is something we came up at the end of the last meeting, so there's way more things to put in here. But just getting all these different different categories down. I think for the first posting of things, it might be pre-DSM up through 2, because the when things come into place in terms of biology, and there's a lot of things around computational biology. I might ask you and Bradly about more in depth, because I know you guys are much more versed in that area, and sort of like how does biology kind of and even here, like I would love to do some sort of a big timeline comparison between DSM psychiatry stuff, CogSci, and AI, or whatever, computer science at least, to kind of see what those summers of winners look like and why, and other things like that too. So this is a very incomplete thing that we're starting to put together. But I think the next steps, some of the interesting things that did come up from looking in the past of this was also, I for whatever reason, I finally got a copy of like a Carl Jung book, the psychology guy who also was a psychiatrist and stuff. And I didn't really know that he did did science stuff, because I'm mostly familiar for like a lot of personality type things with Avery and whatnot in the past. But it's interesting because in the introduction of the book, it talks about how in this era, like the turn of the century, when he was doing work, I think somewhere in Switzerland, it basically said at that time, psychiatry was dominated by German phenomenology, which kind of takes us back to way back phenomenology and what that meant back then, which is not what we've been looking at necessarily. I mean, yes, but differences, and how just the transition from like that phenomenology and what would become like all the legacies going through, and how at that time the big thing for psychiatry in that space was just very diagnostic labeling. And it's cool. I don't know if cool is the right word, but just seeing the development of trying to add more nuance as the DSM progressive, and how that was good or bad, or what encouraged incentivizing that nuance. And obviously, what I was just said was 50 years before the DSM even came out. But this process of expanding was interesting to kind of get a foothold in. Anyway, I don't want to make this DSM meeting right now, but any other thoughts before we move on?
Well, I just wanted to add Grace, I think it's Grace Lindsay's book.
Mind something?
Yeah, Mathematical Models of the Mind.
Yeah.
As being a great history of to kind of complement mind fixers, of models of mind. Thank you. And I was just wondering, because when I was of course familiar with Wiener as the AA gun developer, did you guys talk about how about those kinds of control systems as being just kind of early Breitenberg vehicles? Yeah, and like was even though it broke off into a kind of sub discipline, I guess, of electrical engineering, the fact that, you know, what the models, when you look at them, you look at it, if you watch one working, you could easily think that there's somebody driving the turret. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, we talked about Bradenburg vehicles when Weiner talked about like a few different kinds, some communication machines in their future was the name of the chapter, and that he was describing a few different things, but one of them was basically Bradenburg vehicles.
Right. I mean, you know, like was he just, you know, in a sense, like, because he was before the rise of computers and didn't seem to, if I remember right, didn't seem to really predict what they were going to, or, you know, how ubiquitous and powerful they were going to become so quickly. You know, but at the same time, like, is that just an early artificial intelligence? You know, the way we, or it's so much, you know, I see the large language models and I still just see, you know, an equation, and like matrix weights, and that's all that's in those, you know, naval guns too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the thing I think about, like, you know, is that the book that we read on Norbert Wiener was probably in the 60s, right? The one that we read. And Bradenburg vehicles came around in the early 80s. So you have this gap of time. But it seems like those ideas have been percolating maybe since cybernetics emerged. Because I think, you know, Bradenburg has this input-output view of, you know, like basically neurobiology. It's not really neurobiology, though. But the point being, and, you know, this sort of has persisted through, you know, neurotechnology and sensory motor neuroscience and areas like that, where you see that very clear sort of definition of inputs and outputs and the processing things in between and all of that. And so, I mean, that's where that kind of fits in. But I think there's, it's kind of like there is this throughput, and it's sort of part of cognitive science where it's sort of that arc sort of strafes cognitive science, where you get all these, like, you know, these kind of systems ways of thinking about, you know, like a nervous system or intelligence. And, you know, I don't, that's my thinking. I hadn't thought about it really in that way before, but
yeah, but I mean, you know, when we were introduced to Bradenburg vehicles, it was interesting because it was like, well, we don't, you know, this is, for me, it was the 90s, and it was like, we don't have anything like, you know, computers doing Turing tests, you know, or being close to doing Turing tests. But you looked at it as like, oh, look, this, you know, reminds you of intelligent behavior.
Right.
And yet, you know, what is driving this, which, you know, is a lot like whatever you want to call, you know, the you know, well, again, it's now the term artificial intelligence is so widely used that it's almost meaningless. But anyway, I do think it's interesting to the split of the fields into the fracturing, but, you know, how much of that is really fracturing, how much of that is just people not being generalists and you know, and starting to, you know, like language itself, when it kind of gets spread geographically, it just starts to kind of have its own dialect and things like that. And
well, there were plenty of people doing specialized work back then. They just didn't have the big ideas. The big ideas came in and kind of, you know, people adopt big ideas and they take it back to their subfield, and then that somehow, you know, gets specialized. But
I think I'd rather try to explain cognitive science to somebody than, well, that's not true. I was going to say rather than explaining AI, but only because the recent sense of AI, like, if they're not in the hype bubble about AI, it's infinitely easier because they can say, yeah, actually, it's just this and that. But when they're in the hype bubble, it's like, it's very tedious to try to sort out what does that term mean. Anyway, I think I would like to maybe try to make a presentation about the project Saturday. I don't know if I want to incorporate anything into it here. I kind of wanted to present some things tonight, but it wasn't going to happen tonight. So maybe more about that later. Kind of the goals for the project right now are very minimal, very just like literature review, very getting acquainted with the space to kind of designate what happened. If there's a what happened to cybernetics, and kind of like what has happened in the space of psychiatry, and then maybe there's only some kind of a bigger, like just a general sort of survey or review paper or something with a few specific themes highlighted. But that's far off. So that's kind of the DSM stuff right now. Before we go in deeply into the paper, I do want to give a little bit of time to Amanda, because I know you mentioned things for embodied neurophenomenology stuff. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all.
I started to collect the notes and organize them, but
Did you want me to show this?
Way of organizing.
Oh,
what?
I see it over here. Oh yeah, I can go into Google. Did you want to show this paper, or that's right? Sorry, I'm not sharing my screen anymore.
I was trying to create yet another version that was more organized, and I made it worse. So I don't. I did those handwritten notes at the top there. I did add that, and it's just another version of I feel like what I've written a few times before. But I was trying to like organize my thoughts in a better way, and I failed. So I don't have any great updates. But as I've said before, like even though it's not the most organized, we have a lot of thoughts in those documents, and then linked to in those documents. So, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I think this might be. Is this much older, or is this a new thing that you put together?
That's older. That's like the first embodied intelligence text that I read.
Okay.
So that's
it's all in this stub, or is it somewhere else here?
It's all in the stub or linked to in the stub.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that text is new. But as I was trying to say before, I feel like getting this into like a conference submission format, I know that's like necessary, but in some respects it like did more harm than good with trying to organize my thoughts, because I had to like slim things down so much.
I'm thinking, well, here's something that's come up, and I want. As far as I'm concerned, like I don't want to step on any toes about how to do this. So that's number one, first thing. Second thing, one thing that came up here is the thing I just showed for the DSM stuff, which I think just lost somewhere. Here. This is not hardly anything here right now. But what I've considered doing with this is actually just not even trying to segment things into. This is not a deliverable. This is sort of going to be almost like a database document. I don't know if that's really a thing or not, but it's something a little bit. Some people that I'm working with this are not Notion fans at all. Let's put it that way. And I've just decided to try with this document, just like kind of put all the stuff in one document, and then use it almost like as a master copy of something, and then intentionally extract from it later to make deliverables or other documents later. And I guess I'm wondering, like, do you think trying to put I think that's kind of basically what this Notion stub is. Whoops.
That's what I want, is one place where everything is. But so earlier I was trying to use like basically just like a blank sheet of paper where I could try to organize things more like non-linearly with arrows going everywhere. And that just, I didn't get that into a good form. But yeah, I basically just need to put all the thoughts in one place. But that being said, most of the thoughts are in these Notion stubs, this one, and then the ones that are linked to throughout the
these other ones.
yeah. So it's still in a state where like feedback would be useful and helpful. I know it's not the easiest thing to read through, to like think through and give feedback, but even just like questions could be helpful. Like, what does this mean? This is interesting. Let's say more about this.
What I'd like to do is essentially, it doesn't have to be now, it doesn't even have to be in this group. It can just be aside or some other meeting if you want. But I'd like to kind of go through the notes, because I know a lot of these things, but I kind of want to dialogue with you about what you mean, what they are, and kind of where you see them, and then maybe I don't know. Like I'm kind of exploring like Figma as this big mind mapping thing, and it's like a lot of mind map tools in it. That's great. I think you're kind of averse to that. That's fine. But making something like I like Notion, but I think what it's I'm curious what's the best medium for basically what you see, what I think you're trying to do with this, and what I'm trying to do with the DSM thing. And so I think maybe just making a really big, I call it like database document right now, where we just put the information, and maybe not actually worry about it being organized in a structured way, but just putting like the information in segments out. So I don't know what that is, or if it's just that can be a deliverable if that works, or not a deliverable, but a artifact we're making for research if that works. At the very least, regardless of that specific thing, I think it would be nice to just meet and talk about this specifically at some point. And I don't know how you want to do that. If you want to do that in a meeting, we can do it right now if you want to do it right now, or we can try it some other time, or whatever you feel about that. But I think that would be, I think it's worth attention on that specifically.
I agree. Not right now.
Yeah.
I will actually make a more organized version, maybe in a Google Doc. I was also getting frustrated with Notion.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I might have just been getting frustrated with looking at a screen. I don't know. I haven't found like a good alternative to Notion other than like a pencil and paper, which is why you get my messy handwriting in a screenshot instead of anything more useful. So maybe next time, or the time after that, if we don't meet next week.
I think I'm particularly sensitive to structuring ideas in a thing right now, and I'm a little bit not self-conscious, but I'm a little bit aware that I think I'm going to try to refocus certain things so that way they're in a little bit more tenable things than some of the structuring in Notion, let's say. So yes, okay, great. We have talked about that, and I think I'll be in touch about that, because I think one of the things that we talked about whenever
real cybernetics people would use Emacs and somehow use Lisp scripting to make a Notion alternative.
Oh yeah.
that would be yeah.
Yeah, we just need to develop our own software.
Yeah, and like even even like last time we talked about pushing things forward on this front, and I think this is a worthy thing to kind of flesh out as part of the paper pyramid and everything else. So yes, let's do that. Any other comments before we go into Maturana's paper?
What are data guns? I see in the notes. Data cameras and
it
data
was
guns.
me making fun of AI guns, and then the idea of like data cameras. That's why I laughed awkwardly a while ago.
What are AI guns?
I think Margot's talking about that. In
Yeah, the anti-aircraft guns.
Oh,
track planes, you know, and you know, there all sorts of the targeting equipment that was used in World War II was you know, kind of these basic updating computers, but you know, hardware computers. You know?
Yeah.
How much have you guys talked about? Is it von Forster?
Well, he's come up again and again. Yeah, von Forster. Yeah.
He's talked about his demons. He has like his version of Maxwell's demon, where there's more than one.
I like just saying his demons.
Yeah.
He has his demons.
His Wikipedia says that he was into like electronics and magic.
Right.
Oh, that's pretty fair for I think most of us.
Yeah, sorry, I can't find it right now, but I just saw the biological. What was it? Biological computer laboratory.
Yeah.
That he was director, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. When we the last thing I'll say about the data guns is I was thinking, okay, the data camera as AI, like data camera and collecting is like, okay, we talked about it before. And I thought about data guns as like, I don't remember what I originally thought, but now I can't think about anything else. I'm thinking like, here's the data gun. I'm picking up my cell phone and it's shooting me in the face because I'm just getting this data thrown at me. It's both a gun and an extraction in this like really fucking relationship.
I mean, I was immediately thinking of these new automated chemistry lab systems where they're kind of doing this cybernetic thing where they're updating what experiments they're carrying out based on the data that they are collecting, right? Ooh. So that like it's adjusting the system so that the experiments are getting updated and in a sense you're training the camera on better dimensions of the data, which again is kind of the point of the gun versus the camera, right?
Okay. I don't know if anybody wants to have any like opening commentary about this from the past stuff. I did see this was here at Urbana, and I didn't know if people want to. I don't know if you have any predictions of that in the past since Bradley or like other.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's a historical marker for it somewhere on campus, but I can't remember where. But yeah, there were some people who did like, I don't know if they were like history student or something. They have a nice write up about the lab and its history. So it like von Forster kind of post World War II, and he had a laboratory at Illinois, and he was doing a lot of stuff with defense contractor funding and things like that, and it was definitely the UIUC campus is basically has two parts. There's like north of Green Street and south of Green Street. And north of Green Street is like the engineering and everything, and south of Green Street is the rest of campus. So he was definitely north of Green Street. And as such, it's like very engineering focused. And so they were doing a lot of applied work and things like this. And right around the time this was written, it started, and this was when von Forster was getting older. He started to transition into different types of questions. and it was. I think the administration kind of frowned upon it, but by the mid '70s, von Forster retired, and I think the lab kind of closed down after that. So I mean, it's not there. I mean, it's not been there for 50 years, but it's definitely people are aware of the history, and they did a lot of things in their time. So like they did conventional cybernetics, they had like the engineering arms of it, and then they had the other arms that kind of came later, and they did a lot of interesting things. I don't know too much about like the deep history of it, like who all the alumni are or whatever, but
but there was definitely, I mean, Lindsay's book talks some about, what was happening in Chicago
right.
too, which was obviously super close, and definitely these mathematical models of biological, of neurons.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that was and
that was also part of cybernetics because you had Pitts and McCullough were working basically out of Chicago.
And this is like following this to current times is very much what they call neuromorphic computing,
right?
in being a kind of EE discipline, right. So memristors and all these FPGAs and particular chips that are for spiking neural networks, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I, as a brief, get out of here. As a brief discussion point, I looked into a little bit of the history of like Varela and Maturana and stuff. They were both Chilean, biologists, I guess, at start. And they worked together over a long time. Where did this go? Varela was born in 1946, but Maturana was born in 1928, and so Maturana had, a lot more established originally, and led into this. And I think this paper. I don't know if this paper mentions. Does it mention autopoiesis? I don't. It's not. I just did a search for it. But
just in the reprinted in.
Yeah, not actually in the text of the paper.
Okay. So this is before that, but that happened. I guess that happened later in the early 70s. But yeah. So I guess we can go into that. I don't know if anybody's any other sort of opening thoughts about it. I don't know if you got to read it, Amanda, or anybody else sort of has read it in the past or wants to say anything to frame it right now.
I did not read it. I looked through it very quickly, and I did get a good sense of like the writing style and the organization, which I like. I'm very much looking forward to reading it, but I like how it's broken up in chunks. At like multiple levels, like you have ABC, but then he has these nice categories. I did just kind of skim it, but I like the writing style. It's very like just like philosophically clear. Like this is like, here you go, such assumption begs these questions. And that he's like, well, X implies Y, and this is what a theory should do. So it seems very just very clear. Maybe that's just the sentences that stood out to me as I was.
Well, they said he was heavily influenced by Wittgenstein. So
great. Yeah, I can tell.
So yeah, should be clear.
That's awesome.
That was something that I don't know if anybody read or did more with that Voros on Varela podcast, but that's something I want to finish and read into a bit more because Varela spent time in France, and that kind of was one of the pillars of like influence that Burroughs mentioned for sort of his, I think, like basically critical theory or other views there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to kind of see the strands here, but like I'm happy to dive into this now. So the introduction is sort of, it's interesting because he has the major headlines are, oops, I'm in the wrong space actually right now. The headlines are introduction, and then the problem, cognitive function in general, living systems. Like these are very kind of getting at, this is the best way to do it. It's very interestingly, stated in a way that I appreciate too.
It kind of reminds me a lot of the Burton philosophy. I mean, I noticed he's got the Burton Lafferty there, 1960. Like this, that kind of, very general language, so that it's all encompassing.
Yeah, and I guess sort of the introduction is sort of this commentary on, observation, the role of the observer, and whether or not things are objective or not. He says listener in the sense of knowledge as an experience is something personal and private that cannot be transferred, and that which one believes to be transferable. Objective knowledge must always be created by the listener. The listener understands, and objective knowledge appears transferred only if he's prepared to understand. And I think that's very like communication science, cybernetics to me, in a way that is interesting, and I wonder how he's gonna. It makes sense, but it kind of does. This is kind of what I meant. Like, I think I read this in the chat, or maybe when we first heard of it. It's sort of harkening back to cybernetics as communication and control type speaking. And it's sort of like interesting because it's saying, okay, biology, like you have to see biology in terms of cognition, or cognition in terms of biology here. There's a lot about objective knowledge. What is it? What is to know? How do we know? Biology, the greatest interest to understand a living organization lies in the impossibility of accounting for it by enumeration of its properties. It must be understood as a unity. And he kind of talks about, using the word unit somewhere in here. Yeah, he later talks about, he was speaking of the organism as a unity. When he wrote the essay, he was not aware of the word unit did not always quite mean unity. So, okay.
That seems very Whitehead.
I'm not sure what to say about this commentary on enumeration and how, like maybe that's not the focus or something like that.
Oh yeah, so I guess he's getting at like kind of like a nervous system or something. Enumeration of the transfer functions of all nerve cells would leave us with a list, but now with a system capable of abstract thinking. So this is like, if you think about like a connectionist network, you can like do, we're familiar with credit assignment, where you try to go back and trace, like you say, okay, the network has this output. What's the path through the network, right? And then you can maybe figure out the exact path. And if you can figure out that exact path, then that network is interpretable, but also, you can maybe reverse engineer it. That's the idea. And so enumeration is part of that. So you can enumerate something, and you get, even if you could do that, you would still only have like, a list of numbers. You wouldn't have anything about like what the information is. mean, you could do like information theory, but still, you know, yeah.
And I mean, like,
I feel like he would be really surprised by large language models.
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, there's a certain sense of them being just too early to the electronic game. You know, like they haven't seen how it's going to come together. You know, I mean, I think the point still stands, but it's just like, but it's just funny looking at it where it's just like, we've seen how a lot of these things do come together to give us the semblance of abstract or logical thinking.
Right. Yeah. Well, with large language models, we have the kind of an opposite problem, because we get an output that looks like thinking. It's like with Bradenberg's vehicles, it looked like emotion, but we can't actually. It's very hard to trace it back and enumerate it in the network.
So you really do mean just like the mechanistic interpretation, or like mechanistic interpretability.
Well, I think so. Well, he doesn't say that, but maybe that's what he means. At least that's the way I'm thinking of it. You know, like,
yeah.
I think he might also be thinking of it in terms of like, this is something emergent, bigger than like the outputs. So what is
it does seem like it's like he's still trying to explain, like, you know, but what animals do is so much more powerful than a bunch of relay circuits.
Yeah.
You know, and again, it's just like, you just weren't thinking scale. Yeah, you weren't thinking scale, and you weren't thinking with like nonlinear functions.
Yeah, someone should update this, or maybe update some of the. Yeah, no, I'm serious, because it's like you can probably learn a lot from that. Be honest with you.
To maybe all of those, or many of those ends, like I'm curious how Maturana is viewing, like, going back to the quote from some time ago, where the machine learning introduction course, it was something about because the mediums we're using are computational, you're generating data by just using them, basically, and then there's a lot of personal data from that. And I've been thinking like that in the context of, okay, the medium is making these things explicit, and I'd be curious how that squares with, or what is Mon trying to think about computation, in the sense of, he's kind of pointing out some things even here about the observer and this transferring it, and this ability to listen. And I feel like computation is computational mediums sort of creates a specific, almost maybe just reference or like juxtaposition of input and output. But I'm curious how he views computation. I don't know if we talked about computation significantly ahead, but does he, how will he square, I don't know how to word it quite yet, but there's something about that I want to ask more about as I read the paper, that way. So this is Biology A. I guess this is like section A. Section B, organisms are adapted to their environments. Through the evolution, they have accumulated information about it, coded in their nervous system. He said something about niches soon. I think that's a little bit further. A successful theory of cognition would answer both the epistemological and biological questions. This I propose to do, and propose the purpose of this essay is to put forward a theory of cognition that should be able to provide epistemological insight and the phenomenon of cognition, and an adequate view of the functional organization of the cognizant organism that gives rise to such phenomena as conceptual thinking, language, self-consciousness. And what follows, I shall not offer. Yeah, this is kind of I don't really know what to make of this yet. I will not. He's not going to define anything he's saying. He's just saying, as you talk about it, as I talk about it, it will become clear, or something like that. This she'll do because the internal consistency of the theory will show that these terms are adequate, or indeed adequate, to the phenomenon I'm trying to account for, because I speak as an observer, and the validity of what I say at any moment has its foundation in the validity of the whole theory, which I assert explains why I can say it. Yeah. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that.
That's
I'm
a
not
really
sure.
interesting kind of like philosophical argument. Like the structure of that argument is like circular, but not in a bad way, I guess, supposedly.
It reminds me a lot of some things that I think Varela said, and I'm becoming aware about. Like, well, I'm gonna. I really would wonder. Like, I wish I could sort of not time travel, but like not necessarily fly on the wall, but something like that, where I just like observe Maturana and Varela talking about why they're wording things the way that they do in their writings. I think that'd be really interesting. At any rate, he's Maturana gets to the problem. One, cognition is a biological phenomenon that can only be understood as such. Any epistemological insight into the domain of knowledge requires this understanding. And two, if such insight is to be attained, what is cognition as a function and as a process? So I guess that's his framing.
And again, we could revisit this in light of like what we know about. Well, we know a lot in 50 years, so come back to this, because I don't think people. I mean, I guess people nominally think of cognition as a biological phenomenon, but most cognitive scientists aren't really that interested in the biology per se. I mean, You don't have like, really good. I mean, you have accounts of like neuroimaging, but it's not like really framed in like an organismal biology too often, say. And so maybe occasionally you have like molecular cognition, but that's a fringe area with respect to the field. So, yeah.
Well, sorry to keep thinking that it's historical context, but I mean, I wonder how much like there's it seems like there's this desire to talk about the organism as a unity, and but at the same time, I think they're trying to be really clear. We're not dualists. Like this is a biological system,
Right.
and anyway, I don't know if that explains one here, which is a little, sorry, you can link it to the DSM stuff, which is a little like the discussion that psychiatry is having at this particular time too, right? So it's very much trying to, or there's a group. This is the rise of biological psychiatry, and it's just like everything that's going on is biology. The part before it though is when I'm still the kind of the circular I'm going to give you, I'm talking about these things. These are words that are kind of pretty common in philosophy, right? But it's kind of funny to say like the definitions will become clear in time.
Just trust me, yeah. I mean,
like the structure of the argument is supposed to be a holistic, just like the organism is, or something.
Right, exactly. It'll grow within you. I'm again, like I'm checking references here on the side, and I haven't read Margaret Mead's whatever 1967 talk or addressed to the, what was it to the Mead's 1967 address to the American Society for Cybernetics. But I also just wonder how much, because they are not this guy, but certainly von Forster being Viennan, how much they're thinking about Wittgenstein's systems are unable to or be. You can have self-consistency, but you can't have full coverage, and they this like trying to have this circular definition so that we can be observers, but in a system, but somehow talking about it at a meta level.
And that seems to be a lot of like what this goes into about the observer too, in the sense of, anything is said by the observer. Like I get Maturana is trying to, I guess, situate his.
I mean, certainly the St. John's people would hate me trying to put it in context all the time, but it seems particularly like there's these unstated, or not unstated, but it seems like this is talking about something that it's not clear to me, and I'm trying to reach out. Is this why?
Mm-hmm. I think this section probably just summarized by Stefan here about like basically maybe even just that we're not dualist thing about the observer's system understanding conditions is a biological phenomenon must account for the observer and their role in it. Okay. I don't know if we want to say any more about any of these other points that we've seen of interest here.
This 0.5, it seems like it's frustrated category theory or something, or frustrated like mathematic. The set of all interactions into which an entity can enter its domain of interactions, and then this domain. So there's a domain of interactions that defines an entity, and the observer can define an entity by specifying its domain of interactions. So like that's really kind of hard to map to a specific example.
But it does seem very Whitehead.
Yeah. But I guess what he's saying is like, well, I mean, you can think about like interactions, of course, as being like interactions in a network. You have units that interact, and then you have relations. So those have relations. They can either be uni or bidirectional. They can have different weights. And then, of course, there's relational biology, which we can also use like a symbolic system to represent that. And then if we have a bunch of relations in an entity, that entity has basically got some sort of connectome or some sort of set of interactions within it. And then the observer then actually can define the entity. I guess the observer is the thing that's up on top. Maybe it's like a global organizing principle of the organism, or maybe like the environment. I'm trying to work this out in real time as to what those examples are. But
certainly too, it seems like we're talking about an open system, not a closed system.
Right. He doesn't have any diagrams that might even help.
Can there be an observer if another observer doesn't hear them fall?
So what is an observer? Is it like is it a global state setter, or is it like something outside the system, or what exactly is it?
Well, I do love this, in the philosophy measurement room channel, I've put in some extra videos of various people having conversations about, the philosophy of quantum mechanics.
Oh, okay.
Or interpretations of quantum mechanics, right? And everybody from John Carroll to Wolfram, and lots of different perspectives. Not a and that's not a one dimension, but 5 or 6 different people were coming at it from very different standpoints, but all finding this the problem of defining the observation and and what constitutes an observer and what constitutes a measurement as being like the undefinable, or certainly what all of them are crash on in terms of rocks.
Yeah, they do that. That's an area that's interesting to look in terms of like what an observer is, because that's pretty important in quantum mechanics. But as it turns out, no one can agree on it, so maybe not.
Right? and that you can very much have a modern conversation about it, even though and you can bring in the Copenhagen interpretation.
Yeah.
But not to resolve the issue.
Yeah.
It's an interpretation, and with Wolfram's last thing, which seems to be, he's very hot on this, like having a theory of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, and but he comes back. He says in his discussion, he keeps coming back to the central role of the observer and what constitutes the measurement, even in classical physics. But again, with his kind of building up physics, part of his physics project. But again, he is trying to unify physics, right? So that includes quantum mechanics.
Yeah,
Anyway, sorry.
There's something I don't know how to ask it even yet, but and maybe it's for a physics discussion, but it's sort of along the lines of, it seems to be like the things that are there's a certain constraint on developing ideas, or I mean, you could say fields of study or whatever, but it has to do with how, I guess, the observer, whomever is doing the thing, what the ability to reference, like the nature of juxtaposing the observer or thinker or whatever to the subject, and when it's like part of going back to the computation quote that I keep mentioning, like in computational mediums, those juxtapositions are made either, I don't know if the juxtapositions are made explicitly, but the engagement of the medium dictates a certain set of things that are happening that offer sort of a very clearly demarcated point of view. And it's like that's there are obvious reasons why you can't just make a similar comparison to perhaps like quantum mechanics scale things, or all this first person stuff that we're trying to get at. Like you can't really quite do that. Well, this looks really screwed up. I might have messed up this oh well, I might have moved it.
It's not updated or something. Oh, there you go.
All right, getting used to Figma. That's cool. All right. Ooh, I like that. All right. Anyway, we have about 10 minutes left, so if you want to keep going into the living systems, we can try that, I suppose. Anything else? And there are a few things there. I don't mean to cut anything off.
The definitions will become clear as we go on.
Well, we gotta keep going then. That's like a great incentive to you gotta read the whole paper.
I like I've heard different versions of like the environment is an extension of the organism or vice versa. And I liked the way he said, I guess it's the number one in the living system, about how you can't fully talk about the organism without talking about the niche.
Yeah, I
That
wanted
was
to
a nice articulation of what we call like extended or embedded cognition.
that's that was interesting to me when I heard him get to that. So I want to see what he means more by that. I think that's interesting because it's sort of like, you know, organisms kind of you could maybe say loosely like evolution is about just getting there to be some organisms to be optimized for this specific niche, and then you have this intelligence all built around what that is, and there's just getting things in these different spaces. Like, where's a space that could be optimized for this thing? And it's like, okay, but you know, what? How do you get? How do you is that a tenable way to make a juxtaposition of, you know, some frames of reference?
Yeah, we did have a good example in DivaWorm this week of like stem cell niches and things like that. We're talking about organoids, and so, you know, some of the regulatory capacity of niches to sort of, you know, regulate cell, you know, differentiation and things like that. So it's interesting that, you know, that's an open system, but you definitely have some specific things you can point to in the environment that contribute to the regulation of the cell. And so, you know, we can think of that as like I did a little bit of a thing after the main meeting where I kind of went through like a feedback loop and talked about, you know, some of the things about, say, a cell being regulated in different ways and having like a feedback loop with an observer. But yeah, just there's a video on YouTube if you want to go back and look at that.
Okay. And certainly, as this discussion goes on, this is common. You know, again, the language is a little strange. I think trying to be somewhat general, but it's very easy to see, you know, discussion here of metabolic circuits, and the, you know, like again, these are equations that electrical engineers find very familiar.
Yeah.
You know, and so when, yeah, anyway, hence like the discussion of circuits and molecular biology.
Yeah. If you want to know where the legacy of cybernetics is, you could go to metabolic engineering and some of the circuits that people design there, where they have very, you know, in chemical engineering mainly, and also in systems biology, where they have very precise parameters, and, you know, so it's interesting how that's kind of developed. I don't really know, like, I guess it just kind of started in that field, but like I don't know if there's any intersection there between cybernetics, formal cybernetics, and that. It'd be interesting to know.
I think there has to. I mean, there has to be.
Yeah.
There has to be, and I think it relates, or, you know, it's. I think following the when you look at the history of numerical computing as well, right?
Yeah.
One, you see how much of it was taking place in national labs, and two, you know, what's interesting is that national labs had these kind of they had to multitask, right? So they had, you know, they had to solve chemical equations, and they were building electronic equipment, you know, and certainly the computing people were like, these are the same, you know, this is the same Fortran code.
Yeah.
And that gave us, you know, and so Oak Ridge and Glass, you know, and several other packages. Yeah, seems like that was probably all familiar.
Yeah.
So we're getting into living systems, other points here, homeostatic systems.
One thing I want to keep in mind as I read this is just because von Forster was mentioned, I'm really interested in his order from noise idea. So his example is, to demonstrate this, is it's like imagine a collection of magnetic cubes, like small magnetic cubes, which you can actually like buy. I've seen like they're called buckyballs, but I've also seen a cube version. Really simple like toy. And he says you have like imagine all of them like disorganized, but then you get them together and you shake up the container, and then you get this elaborate looking pattern because of the properties of each individual magnet. And he's saying that's like a type of self-organization. But what was interesting to him was that what you're putting into the system is just noise. It's energy, but it's disordered energy. You're just shaking the box, and what comes out of it is something ordered. So I want to see how that relates to what this paper is going to get into, because that's basically what, and this is where his demons come in. Like you have, basically the demons were supposed to be more general cases of like the magnetization of each cube, like the properties of the thing that makes the order come from noise. But that's basically what living systems do. You take energy and build structure.
They have a lot of work on spin glasses and physics that follow up to that. Yeah,
that's what they call icing model.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be, like that would be in the zeitgeist of that time, because those would have been coming out in the 50s and 60s, wouldn't they, Bradley?
Yeah, they started working with them then, and then they kind of refined them.
Yeah. What these icing models? So it's some, part of it is coming. I think is coming from, or at least solutions is coming from, what comes to be called MCMC, but icing models have this really interesting. They're basically these fields of magnets, and what happens to them when they have local interactions. Because you've got them close together. So it sounds like you're giving some energy to a set of them, and then seeing how they settle, right? So that's a little like if you check those, these are like still used today, and it's funny because the last version that I saw of these was loopy belief loopy belief networks to try and solve basically icing spin glass modeling, which just reminds me of von Forster's circular reasoning.
Okay, we're pretty much at the top of the hour, so I wanted to talk a little bit. We can go through this next time. I don't know if we want to go through everything in detail or not. We can go through it as needed. Also want to talk about for next time. Hopefully between now, it'll be tough for me because I have this big event through next week. I'm not sure what my ability will be, but I would at least like to work on the embodied neurophenomenology notes stuff. Finish. But is there anything else anybody wants to suggest for like a next sort of deep dive thing. I think I wouldn't mind trying to flesh out things around the embodied neurophonology stuff ahead. I think that's sort of something I'd like to kind of put effort into, but I don't yet know what would be good for that. Maybe Amanda's suggestions or anything else, but yeah. Maybe just think about that and put stuff in the Slack and go from there.
Sounds good.
That said, are we meeting tomorrow for the reading of the cybernetics group? I think we didn't meet last week, but
Yeah, we can meet tomorrow. We're still on that paper.
we're still on 11 things, living things paper.
Yes, let's definitely finish that.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'll see you tomorrow then.
See you
Take
then.
care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.